you had briefly spoken with somebody in the audience about digital media and information and freedom of information, and I remember Derrick Jensen actually wrote about this in one of his books. I can't remember which one, about the concept that information is technically part of nature, and therefore nobody owns information.
Yeah.
And information is not property.
Right.
Could you kind of speak more about that, just for?
Well, what's fascinating about that concept, I mean, we worked in Seattle to help folks advance a right to internet freedom kind of local legislation, and unfortunately it didn't make the ballot, but that was our foray into that field. I like Derrick's stuff in that I find a lot of consonance with it and agreement with it. But the fact is that's not the current status. The current status is information is owned. It's been privatized, and even attempts to provide internet equality. You know, the stuff that recently went through the communications, the FCC stuff, trying to mandate certain issues with internet access and internet freedom, and how the companies have to carry certain information and can't slow down the transmission rates and those types of things. It all raises the issue of corporate constitutional rights, because corporations treat those types of rules as an invasion of their constitutional rights, because they treat the data and other information and access as private. And so the two really come into sharp conflict as much as the environmental issues that we've been working on over the years. And so it really means groups that work on those issues changing the way that they do things in terms of stepping back and then moving forward to make law in the vision of what they want, rather than what can they get from the FCC or from the existing regulatory systems.
One of the things I'm focused on is Palestine Freedom.
Yeah.
And the village of Belen. I don't know if you've heard their story, but they're a farming village, and there's fences being built through their village, and it's because the state of Israel and certain Israeli corporations want to divert their water sources.
Yeah.
So, could a concept like community ordinances work in a place like Palestine that isn't even considered officially a state? And as far as their, I guess, level of influence in
probably
the legal
not
system.
But local lawmaking here in the United States, I mean, Israel does what it does because of certain support it gets from the United States, and so perhaps local lawmaking aimed in that direction to support Palestinians in communities by cutting off financial aid to the Israelis, or doing other things that could be done through that legislative process might be the answer. But for the Palestinians, I mean, they're in open defiance already and fighting for their freedoms, and local lawmaking is not something that's going to jazz them up, or that they have any real footing to do. So the question is, how can other communities help them, I think, outside of Israel?
Okay. I also have some, at least one friend. He's also part Cherokee, and he is of a libertarian mindset, and he gets really freaked out when I talk about the idea that nobody owns nature.
Right.
What would you say to people who get really freaked out about that idea, who are of a libertarian mindset?
Well, it's about the fact that we should not be able to use nature as property to actually destroy nature and ecosystems. Libertarians, if you're an economic libertarian that continually treats ecosystems and natural communities as property, you're not going to be happy with that new law. You're not going to be happy with that new concept. And so some of it's just inconsistent inherently because people are working from two different value systems. You know, rights of nature is not a new thing. It goes back 5,000 years, even longer than that in indigenous communities. It has then driven itself into Western culture through the 70s, when people did a series of books and the Supreme Court issued a dissenting opinion that became famous about rights of nature stuff. But the question is, can we continue to live on the planet if nature is considered property? Because once it becomes property, if you own more property and more nature, it carries with it the ability to destroy more nature. But it's not surprising to me that economic libertarians would freak out, because libertarian is based on, in some ways, constitutional rights, personal rights, and some of that is based on property rights. And this is about a reconceptualization of property, away from being something that somebody owns to use as they wish, to taking away some of the rights that are inherent in the bundle of rights. To say, sure, you can develop something as long as you don't violate the rights of the ecosystem when you do so. So we've been talking about sustainable development for years, but never talked about what underpinnings of law need to be put in place to actually enforce sustainability. And some of that means changing the nature of property as we understand it. And so it doesn't surprise me that libertarians would be freaked out about it.
Okay. And my last question, which is kind of related, is there's some criticism amongst a lot of libertarians who I know of something called the ICLEI, ICLEI. I can't remember exactly what it stands for.
Yeah, I remember, but don't remember at the moment. Yeah.
And
local governments that sign off on ICLEI, ICLEI.
Yeah, and it ties into sustainable development.
Yep.
And as Derrick Jensen wrote, there's no such thing.
Yes.
And so I guess the question would be, this Sustainable Development Initiative has its roots in something called Agenda 21.
Right, the UN
which is, the UN. And I'm sure you know some of the people who took part in that meeting.
Yep.
And there's concern, and not just concern, I mean, it's already kind of happening as far as the way it's being used to kind of circumvent a lot of those policies into into municipalities.
Yep.
How can something like a community ordinance and community bill of rights prevent that from happening?
Well, it's not like we want to prevent all of it from happening. There's some stuff in Agenda 21, even though we disagree with the process about how it was derived, that there's still some good stuff in there. The problem is Agenda 21 has become a catchword, a phrase that people throw around, and as if the whole thing is a bad thing. It's not. I mean, a lot of the conservative development folks use Agenda 21 as a whipping post. There's a lot of stuff in there that we shouldn't like, and we can use local ordinances to try to fix some of that stuff, but the rights of nature is the most powerful. I mean, if we're really talking about sustainability, it means building in safeguards for nature that we can't destroy. So as part of our ownership over stuff, that it doesn't carry with it the right to destroy it. And so instead of worrying about Agenda 21, we should actually worry about what new structure of law we're going to put in place to protect nature and ecosystems. And that becomes the challenge, I think, for communities.
Okay. Thank you very much, Thomas. It's been great hearing you speak tonight.
Yeah, it's good to be in Oregon and talking about these issues with you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.